People always told me that demons were nothing but trouble, evil through and through. They said you couldn't trust them, not one bit, and that all they ever did was bring misery to folks. If they helped you, it was only because they had something to gain for themselves. For the longest time, I didn't even know what a demon really was. That all changed when I turned 16, and I found out something that shook me to my core. My buddy, Ryan, was a Satanist. Now, when I heard that, my first thought was, he must be a devil worshiper. Couldn't wrap my head around it. Every time I saw Ryan, I made sure to let him know just what I thought. I'd scold him, mock him, and ridicule his beliefs any chance I got. Looking back, I'm not proud of how I acted, but at the time I thought I was doing the right thing. You see, I was raised in a Christian household. Not just the kind of Christian who went to church on Christmas and Easter. I was all in. I carried my faith with me everywhere, both in my heart and literally in my hands. My mom had given me this beautiful Bible, a special edition that she'd saved up for. I took that Bible with me wherever I went, like it was a part of me. It wasn't just a book to me. It was a piece of my mom's love. Every time I opened it, I thought about how she'd gone out of her way to buy something so meaningful for me. The leather cover was soft but sturdy, and the gold-edged pages practically glowed when the sunlight hit them. It wasn't just special because it was rare. It was special because it came from her. Even though I rarely read anything besides that Bible, it wasn't just about the words. It was about the connection it gave me to my faith and my family. Holding it reminded me of the nights my mom would sit beside me, reading stories from it and teaching me about kindness and forgiveness. Funny how much weight an object can carry when it's tied to someone you love. I used to read that Bible every single day, morning and night, hoping it would give me guidance or peace. But in the end, it didn't help me. Not the way I thought it would. Eventually, I made a decision that might sound shocking. I burned it. It wasn't an easy choice, but I felt like that Bible was a tether, a lifeline holding me to a version of myself I didn't want to be anymore. It was a constant reminder of the boy I used to be, the one who always did what he was told, who was shielded from the harsh truths of the world. I wasn't that boy anymore, and I didn't want anything tying me to the idea of going back. This story picks up a few months after that. And let me tell you, what happened during this time changed the way I see the world forever. It's my proof, real, undeniable proof, that demons aren't all evil. In fact, I'd say most of them aren't. Back then, I had a girlfriend. For privacy, let's call her Rachel. Things were complicated between us. We just crossed a line together. We had unprotected sex for the first time. I thought it meant something. But right after that, she dumped me. Just like that, she packed up her things, moved out, and headed to California without even looking back. I wasn't heartbroken over Rachel. No, the breakup didn't bother me as much as something else did. I had developed a craving, a serious dependency on sex. I don't know when it started, but after that first time, it was like a switch flipped in my brain. I didn't just want it, I needed it. But with Rachel gone, there was no one to satisfy this hunger of mine. I felt trapped in this cycle of desperation, consumed by an addiction I couldn't control. I was at my wit's end when I came across this online group called Joy of Satan. They had a mailing list, so I sent an email asking if anyone knew of a ritual or something. Anything that could help me get rid of this overpowering thirst. For days, I heard nothing, and I figured no one was going to reply. But after about a week, someone finally responded. Their reply wasn't much. Just one word. Succubus. I remember staring at the screen, confused and frustrated. What in the world was a succubus? I emailed the person back, trying to get more information, but they never responded. It felt eerie, like something out of one of those old internet horror stories. Like that smile.jpg creepypasta where someone sends you a cursed picture, and then they vanish without a trace. I was left with more questions than answers, and something about that single word sent a chill down my spine. I didn't know it then, but that email was just the beginning of a journey I'd never forget. So, one evening, I found myself logging onto this website called Joy of Satan. I was curious about something I'd been hearing whispers about: succubi. After typing Succubus into the search bar, I came across an entire page dedicated to them. My curiosity got the better of me, and I started reading every word. Now, in case you're not familiar with what a succubus is, let me break it down for you. A succubus is said to be one of the daughters of Lilith, who's known as the first demon and a kind of sex goddess. Lilith's children, according to legend, are minor deities tied to sexuality and desire. It was wild to think about, but something about the idea had me hooked. I thought to myself, this is it. This might just be what I need to stop my mind from spiraling into madness. You see, I'd been struggling with some things: loneliness, a restless mind, the works, and this seemed like a way to fill the emptiness. The problem was, while the Joy of Satan site had plenty of information about what succubi are, it didn't explain how to summon one. That left me at a dead end. But I wasn't about to give up that easily. So, I turned to the broader internet, combing through forums, old pages, and obscure sites until I found something that seemed legit. For privacy reasons, I'm not going to get into exactly where I found it, but let's just say I had my instructions. When I decided to do the ritual, I wanted to make sure I got everything right. It was similar to the soul dedication ritual they talked about on the site, but I made a few changes. I'll admit, I went a little overboard. I used more blood than the instructions called for. They said just a couple of drops would do, enough to write my name, but I let a full 10 drops hit the paper with my letter before I burned it. Watching the flames curl up the edges of the paper, I felt a mix of nervous energy and anticipation. First, nothing happened. I just sat there in the dim light of my room, staring at the ashes and wondering if I'd done something wrong. But that night, when I went to bed, things took a turn. This is where most people start to get creeped out. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt it. Sleep paralysis. If you've ever experienced it, you know it's like being trapped between being awake and dreaming, unable to move, your body frozen while your mind is fully aware. It's terrifying, but this time it felt different. That night, I woke up, and right away, I knew something wasn't normal. My body wouldn't move, not an inch, but oddly enough, I wasn't scared. You'd think waking up paralyzed would send me into a panic, but instead, I felt this strange sense of calm, like some kind of invisible blanket of peace had settled over me. That's when I noticed it, the weight. It was like someone or something was pressing down on my chest, but it wasn't heavy enough to hurt. My eyes darted around the room, and from what little I could see, there was an imprint right there on the bed beside me. Whatever it wasn't visible, but it was definitely real. Then I felt it. A tingling sensation, like a soft, electric current humming along my skin. It started in my chest, right where the weight was, and spread outward. At the same time, I could feel something cold. A hand, maybe? Tracing slow, deliberate movements across my upper torso. It wasn't frightening. In fact, it was strangely pleasant, even comforting. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. And as the sensation spread, I realized something else. Whatever this presence was, it wasn't just touching me. It was moving around on top of me. Now, don't get me wrong, the whole thing was surreal, but it never once felt uncomfortable or threatening. I just laid there, unable to move, as this presence worked its way across me. The tingling sensation grew more intense, and before long, I was overwhelmed. The pleasure was so intense, it was like my body didn't know how to process it all. I stayed awake for hours, just caught up in the experience, until eventually, I passed out. Not from exhaustion, but because the pleasure was too much to handle. When I woke up the next morning, everything was back to normal. I could move again, no problem. In fact, I felt better than normal. My body was buzzing with energy, like I'd had the best sleep of my entire life. I remember thinking, man, that must have been one heck of a dream. At the time, I figured that was all it was, a really vivid, really amazing dream. But it didn't take long for me to realize there was more to it than that. The next night, it happened again. I fell asleep like usual, but about an hour in, I woke up. My body was frozen again, just like before. And just like before, I didn't panic. That same calm feeling settled over me, and the familiar sensations started up. Cold, delicate hands brushed over my skin, sending shivers down my spine, but not in a bad way. It was soothing, comforting, pleasurable. This kept happening night after night. I'd lay down, drift off, and then an hour later, I'd wake up to that same strange mix of sensations. Each night felt a little more intense than the last, like this presence was slowly building toward something bigger. By the end of the week, it had escalated. It wasn't just hands anymore. I could feel the full weight of a body pressing against mine, moving with me, around me. I'm not going to get into the explicit details because, frankly, you don't need to hear about all that. But let's just say that by this point, it was no longer just caresses and tingles. It had become full-on physical intimacy. Every night felt like stepping into another world, one where the rules of reality didn't apply. It wasn't a dream. I knew that much now. Whatever this was, it was real. Things got stranger after a while. Some nights, I'd have these dreams, and that's when I knew I wasn't just losing my mind from a whole week of barely any sleep. See, I don't dream, but these dreams, they were of a stunning woman, dressed in almost the same outfit as the demon girl from the cover of Davi Vanity's Poison Love album. After that, things began to shift, but not in a bad way, quite the opposite, actually. Started to feel, well, pleasurable in a way I didn't expect. The visits at night grew more intense, almost painful sometimes. But honestly, I think I kind of liked it. I mean, I'm a masochist, so it worked for me. I'd wake up each morning with strange bruises on my arms and neck, bruises that didn't really make sense. Every night, I'd hear this voice. It would ask if I'd let her in, and every time, without thinking, I'd say yes. It became like an automatic response, like I couldn't help myself. Soon enough, it wasn't just happening in my dreams. I started seeing her everywhere, in school, at home, and I gotta say, I didn't mind it one bit. Then one night, she said something that threw me off. She told me that she couldn't keep coming unless I gave her a name. So, without much thought, I gave her the name of the girl I had a crush on at the time, Haley Jean. She became someone I could talk to, someone I could confide in. A lot of people don't get that about succubi. They're not here to cause harm or steal our souls. No, they're here to help in their own way. The only time succubi or incubi ever hurt humans is when they're dealing with someone from a Christian or Judaic background. It's part of how Satan's forces strike at our enemies. And yeah, Christians and Satanists have been at odds ever since the original Bible was written.